This is episode number 193. Today, we're featuring artist from Italy, Francesco Fontana. You don't want to miss this one.
This is the PleinAir Podcast with Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. In the PleinAir Podcast, we cover the world of outdoor painting. Called PleinAir, the French coined the term, which means open air or outdoors. The French pronounce it plein air. Others say PleinAir. No matter how you say it, there is a huge movement of artists around the world who are going outdoors to paint. And this show is about that movement. Now, here's your host, author, publisher, and painter, Eric Rhoads.
Thank you, Jim Kipping, and welcome everybody to the PleinAir Podcast. Happy November. Hard to believe November's here. If you're listening to this right on time, tomorrow is Election Day. Lots of tension in the air, big day. Everybody's wondering what's happening. Anyway, I recently wrote in my Sunday Coffee blog about how to cope with all the drama of all the elections and COVID and the civil unrest and everything. You might want to check it out at coffeewitheric.com. I write every week. I've got 250,000 listeners now, which is pretty cool. And it's called Sunday Coffee. Go to coffeewitheric.com. You know, I never, ever get political, but none of us have the right to gripe about outcomes if we don't vote. Voting's a privilege. We should not ignore it. And so if you haven't voted, please consider it. I did early voting a week or so ago, and I was thinking, wouldn't it be nice? I've been watching television and seeing social media, and I thought, I don't want to see these political ads anymore. I already voted. You can't change my mind now. So I was thinking, wouldn't it be nice to have an app that eliminates all the political ads once we voted so we didn't have to continue to listen to it all? I guess that's kind of a pipe dream. Anyway, a couple of things coming up to remind you about. The PleinAir Convention early bird deadline, which is the best price, is Black Friday, right after Thanksgiving. Grab your seat now and book it, because once everybody's allowed out, this is going to be the biggest PleinAir convention ever. As a matter of fact, it already was before we had to cancel. So it's going to be in Denver in May. Grab your seat now. And of course, if COVID gets in the way, it's 100% refundable. Go to pleinairconvention.com and get your seat. You won't regret it. And at every convention, we've always done a watercolor stage and had watercolor on there as well. Lately, we've done a lot of virtual conferences, and we weren't able to fit watercolor in really because we didn't have multiple stages. We did PleinAir Live, and we did Realism Live. In both cases, we had instructors from all over the world and attendees from 30 countries or so. It was the world's largest PleinAir event, world's largest realism event. And we're going to be doing now Watercolor Live in late January, kind of towards the end of the month. And we've already got the top watercolorist in the world, including Joseph Zbukvic. So you don't want to miss that. Grab a ticket while the price is the lowest ever, but it goes up after Thanksgiving. And please keep in mind, I'm doing more watercolor than ever because I like to have watercolor with me or gouache or water media with me when I'm traveling sometimes, because sometimes I just can't bear taking all the paint with me, and this is just easy. So learning watercolor for me is a priority, and it might be something you want to consider. So go to watercolorlive.com, check it out, get your seat. Again, there's a price increase coming up right after Thanksgiving. In the October-November issue of PleinAir Magazine, which I hope you subscribe to, but if you don't, maybe you should. You can pick it up at Barnes & Noble. It's the number one selling art magazine nationally, number one selling art and photography magazine nationally at Barnes & Noble. We also are now in 238 Michaels stores. We have a feature on rising stars, spotlighting 11 artists who are getting the attention of gallery owners, event organizers, and competition jurors. And also in this week's newsletter, PleinAir Today, which comes out weekly, which you also should get, it's free, features Joshua Cunningham, who's painting Abandoned to Sunset, won Best PleinAir Work of the June 2020 PleinAir Salon. Coming up after the interview, I'm going to be answering your art marketing questions in the Art Marketing Minute. But let's first get right to our interview with Francesco Fontana, who creates studio and PleinAir works of contemporary life in watercolor and oil in Italy. Francesco Fontana, welcome to the PleinAir Podcast.
Oh, thank you. Hi, Eric. Thank you for inviting me.
Well,
Yeah.
it's the miracle of technology. You're in Italy, and it's really great to talk to you.
Yes. Great talk to you too. Sure.
I was trying to think about where you and I first met, and I think it was at the PleinAir convention. Does that sound right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I don't know if it was some 2014 or 15. I think 14 anyway. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, a few years ago.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's been a while. Well, and
that was great.
we met, and we ended up becoming friends. We ended up doing a video together. So a lot has happened since then.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. 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 I got into the more, more involved in the plein air circuit in the PleinAir network, and I've been doing while I was in the faculty in the following years in the faculty of the convention. We made a DVD. We made a lot of things, and
So
then
So did
yeah.
this idea of you getting involved in the plein air circuit, so to speak, which means for those listening who might not know what that means, it means going and being an artist in many of the shows, the plein air shows around the country. Did that happen as a result of you going to the plein air convention and learning about that, or had you been already doing that?
No, no, no. I just getting to know the PleinAir Festival Network, just the PleinAir conventions. That helped a lot to get me into this exciting, wonderful network of festivals that gather artists, to paint together for usually for 5 days or a week long, and just staying the paintings and the in the gallery, and it's very exciting. It's very, and also it's typical. We don't have that in Europe, so it's very American and very well organized. It's you've got a lot of awards, sales, a lot of effort by the local promoters to to reach for collectors and invite art lovers, and help the local community to raise money for the arts.
Well,
So
I'm curious about that. You said you don't have that in Europe. I have been talking to some people in Ireland and Scotland and England who say that it's kind of starting to happen, and I'm curious about whether or not you're seeing any activity whatsoever in terms of people starting to do some plein air events in Europe.
well, I know there's one in Ireland. Yes, it's pretty big, but it's not so popular as it is in the States. I mean, no comparison at all. I'm afraid, the problem, it might be, but hopefully we're going to solve that. Somebody's going to solve it. It's that there might not be an audience willing to, I mean, mature, ready to an audience ready to go to attend plein air festivals and buy the results of the efforts of the artists on the field. This is exists, but it's very kind of the Sunday kind of local happening, which is very kind of amateurish. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah, well, there's nothing wrong with that either. I mean, thankfully they're doing that and getting outdoors and painting as hobbyists, and that's kind of how it all begins for a lot of us anyway. But you say that whether or not there's going to be an audience that's kind of prepared for that. That I think that I think most of the plein air events that started around America. When I started Plein Air magazine, there were no more than 2 or 3 plein air events nationally. And since the magazine began and since the movement kind of really blossomed, I'm not sure that we had anything to do with it. We may or may not have, but they're now probably 200, 300, 400 events. Every town has got one. Some of them do really good jobs and big events. Others do smaller events. Some of them are well run. Some of them are not. But at least they're doing them. And I think that the audiences are not necessarily people who have primed themselves with, gee, I'm going to go buy a painting. I think it's more like well, I wonder what this is. I'm curious. And then so they just show up, and then, they find themselves falling in love with the painting. So you may find that the same thing happens in Europe.
Yeah, definitely in the sense that it needs a little time to get a little more mature in the sense that, of course, there's nothing wrong if you're an amateur, a Sunday painter. But, from a point of view of a professional, that sometimes can be a little bit tricky because, you might understand why. But however, people enjoy watching artists painting outdoor, and on the other end, there are a lot of painters now devoted to plein air. So you will get events, but it's more like meetups or stuff like that. Just festivals where people gather to paint. And that's cool. That's okay. That's interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that in every case, it's going to take a catalyst. There's usually one person in a community who, has experienced it elsewhere and says, I think we can bring it here. They usually get in touch with us and they say, how do we do it? We have people who kind of walk them through, how do you start it? How do you start an event? What makes a successful event? What not to do, what to do. As a matter of fact, we have some dialogue. We usually have something at the convention where we get the show organizers together, and we had that planned for Denver before, so I'm sure we'll have it planned for Denver again when we do it in May. Obviously, we had to cancel because of the coronavirus, but I think that the key is just finding the right people. Somebody listening might be that person, might say, I think I'll start one in Italy, and another one says, I'll start one in my part of Italy, and next thing you know, it starts small. Next thing you know, you got 300-400 events.
Yeah. But absolutely, I don't want to give you the idea that I'm sort of pessimistic. I'm ready to help. I offer my help, also my know-how to a bunch of people. So definitely, there might be people. I'm sure there are people who are willing to set up an event, to promote it, to make it live in Europe as well. So in Italy as well. Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
By the way, I don't think there's a pessimistic bone in your body from knowing you all these years. I know that you're an optimist, so I appreciate that. So how did this all begin for you, Francesco? You are a professional painter. You're excellent. You tend to focus mostly on watercolor, from what I can tell. But this all started somewhere. How did this passion begin?
Well, that was the typical kid with the pencil in the hand all the time. That's the thing. That was a long time ago. So I was born with this kind of call, I would say. And then I moved to Paris when I was 21, I think. The story. I had that kind of bohemian dream in my head. So I moved to Paris from Palermo, Sicily. I moved to Paris. At the time, I didn't even know French or to speak French. So anyway, so that was an adventure. And then I started actually my career just as a portrait artist down the street, or basically up in Montmartre, down in Saint-Germain-des-Prés, all the district where artists gather in Paris. So
I'm curious about that. I want to ask you a couple of questions about that before you move on to the rest of that story, because I have seen, I've seen the artist around the square in Montmartre and so on. And I wonder, is that something that happens randomly, or is that controlled? Does an artist have to have a license to be there? Do they have to pay a fee to be there? Because the last time I was there, I got the impression that they were controlling it very carefully. I was curious when you were doing it, if that was the case.
Yeah, that was the 80s, and at the time it was pretty busy, because the square is pretty small, so you fill up very easily, and so there was a license to be able to paint in there and to work in there, but some people would just get into just around the square, and just to get to try to grab some tourists anyway. So it was, was loose in a way. But basically, that's pretty controlled. There are rules to be there. I mean, there were rules at the time. There were also some kind of guy trying to control the situation, like not really legal. There were two sides. There was the legal side where you were supposed to have a card, an artist card to be, in a license. In the other hand, you might get just sneak in, find a little spot if some guy would protect you. That was pretty funny. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah, kind of like a mafia situation. Not that really exists.
I didn't want to say that, but anyway, no, you know what? A little story that might interest the audience, but just sort of 2-3 months ago, I could find through Facebook and through YouTube or whatever, a fellow artist that used to paint down in Paris that was almost 40 years ago, and I had lost track of him for decades, and then I found him out, and he's still there.
One that was there when you were there, still there.
Yeah.
It must have turned out to make a pretty decent living, because otherwise it wouldn't have been worth it.
Sure, yeah, I'm sure it was at the time already, in a way, although the competition was pretty big. But the guy is a British, Malaysian British passport guy. Anyway, he was kind of a saver, not like me. So I think he bought a house with that business.
So that had to be a pretty tough life, though. You were young. You said you were, 16 or 17?
No, I was about 20.
Oh, 20.
21,
and how long did you do it?
Oh, for a couple of years. Yeah.
And you showed up every day, rain or shine?
Yeah.
And what was that process like? So did you try to, did you wait till somebody came up and asked you questions, or did you try to flag them down and pull them in? What was that whole thing like?
Oh, well, there's a lot of, in the first place, I will tell you, we were sit there and just wait for people to come to us, questions. Basically, people would ask how much it costs. I can remember, but that wasn't so expensive. But there were some of us were pretty aggressive, I would say. Others were pretty nice. I can tell you who was the winner, because sometimes even the most aggressive artist would just maybe get the customer, but then the customer would reject the portrait, right? So that was one of the risks of that kind of business. You know what I mean?
Oh, so you weren't obligated to buy it. If you asked somebody to paint it and then you didn't like it, you could say no.
Yeah, there was no way. Anyway, you couldn't oblige it. So, and if you were nice, you just apologize. Maybe you thought it was a great job, but anyway, you would apologize and okay, that's it. Some of the people were more aggressive. So the street life, as you said, rain and shine, but also, try to cope with the street life. It's actually a street life, street struggle sort of. I mean, it can be fun. It was fun, but also a lot of, sometimes there were fights. Sometimes there were nasty things happening. I don't want to romanticize. You say that. Although that was probably the most, the time that I was mostly growing up fast, and it was an amazing period of my life. So of course, it was great, but it wasn't easy anyway. It was tough.
Yeah,
sometimes.
well, it doesn't sound like very romantic to me. I mean, I think it's fascinating, but it sounds like a tough way to make a living, because last time I was there probably were 50 or 100 artists in the square around there. And, they're all kind of barking at you, trying to get you to sit down and sit at their easel. Or, of course, some of them are selling paintings, not just portraits. And but what a great experience. And to go through it at 20 years old, I don't think I'd want to do it today, but it probably was kind of fun at 20.
Yeah, at 20 that was great. All my friends down in Palermo were jealous that I was living in Paris. You know what I mean? It was exciting because I met a lot of very, very, very wonderful artists and friends. I met friends. I'm friends with some of them, 2 or 3, as I said. We're still in touch. It was a very intense time, very growing, making me learning, a lot about life and people. Maybe I mentioned sometimes that there was the war, Iraq at the time, but the two fellas, Iraqi and Iranian artists, wonderful artists, they were friends. So that was an example of something beautiful happening, and we were talking about art all night. It was very, very exciting and very, something you treasure for your lifetime anyway.
Well, and that's something we do romanticize. I oftentimes think back to the Impressionists in Paris, and there's them sitting around in the bars, having glasses of wine and having arguments or discussions about art. And that sounds like a lot of fun, because, that's what we do at the PleinAir convention, or we do at the Fall Color Week or the Adirondacks or any of these events. Is, we sit up and we always end up, we talk about our lives a little bit, but mostly, we start talking about art and other artists and the things that they were doing. And that's a great way to pass an evening. Yeah.
I remember that time that was very much like that. Now you have this maybe a little bit through the media, or when you get the chance to together, like in the PleinAir convention or other events. But most of the times that was kind of on a daily basis.
Yeah.
Today it's more like, just chatting or posting stuff on social media, and that's the way we connect most of the times. Like that, I would say,
Well, and you have a family. You have 2 daughters, I think, right?
Yeah. See.
Yeah. So
yes,
and so life's a little different now. We have responsibilities.
Sure. That's why I was. It's pretty weird, because I find pretty natural that of course I left that kind of life we were talking about in Paris, but at the same time, all the PleinAir thing that happened in the past few years found me ready in a way, because I knew how is to be out, down the street in a way. On the other hand, as you say, I have family. I got a studio to run. This pandemic to take care of. To protect the family. Of course, you change. So that's for sure. And different problems.
So what was pandemic like for you? It kind of started out pretty early in Italy, and you obviously have had to try and eke out a living throughout all of this. What did you find this experience to bring you that was both positive and also difficult or negative?
Yeah, to be honest, in the spring, like in March, this started in March, and we were a little bit, of course we were a little bit scared, but at the beginning we didn't take it, we took it seriously, but not scary, just serious. And then the lockdown, for me, it was kind of good, because I was in the studio. My life didn't change very much, actually, my daily life, because I was in the studio, I kept painting. I had a couple of commissions, get done. And so it was a way to focus, to concentrate in a way, to meditate, to sort of think about your life and art. And there was silence all around the neighborhood. So in a way, I loved it. I must tell you. But it was scary because the ambulances we had, of course, with the perception of people that were suffering, that were dying, that were, that was terrible. I had a student, for instance, a long-time student that lost his dad. We had the perception that people were dying, but we were safe. So it was a mixed feeling, sort of. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then we went through the summer, and it was pretty nice. I must tell you, we traveled as a family. I traveled by myself, within Europe anyway, and it was pretty fun. It was good. But now, unfortunately, we're back into the drama because cases are increasing again. The famous second wave is, taking place. And so it's kind of a more kind of tricky than in the spring because we know more, we know a lot about it, and so we don't know. Actually, we're pretty confused, I must tell you.
I think everybody's confused, and we won't get into that. I think that there's a lot of misinformation and a lot of confusion and a lot of data manipulation, et cetera. So we'll just avoid that topic because we can't make anybody happy no matter what we do on that one. But I'm glad you made it through it, and I'm glad you're okay. And yeah, I think it's been nice to have that concentrated time, and it probably, you probably live in a noisy area, so having that silence was probably pretty good. So I'm curious, were you able to get out and do any plein air painting, or did you pretty much have to stay inside the entire time?
You talking about the spring, like March?
Well, when you were under the quarantine rules.
Oh yeah, no, actually, I wasn't able to go out. After a while, I realized that there's a park just in my condo. It's a big condo. This is not a single house, in the countryside. So, but we have a little park, and I realized that. As soon as I realized that, I went down 3 or 4 times and did some painting. There are a few paintings in the gardens in the park. Let's call it a yard, large yard within the condo buildings, and that was an emotion because it was the first time, after a month or so, that I was really locked in, in the house. So we didn't put the nose outside, except for the grocery, right?
Right.
So that was it. Then in May, I went out in May, and that was we were free to go out. The quarantine was terminated, so we went out and we were able to paint and do everything.
One of the things that I found fascinating throughout all of this is the pivot that so many people have made. I've talked to and heard from, as you have, hundreds of artists and galleries, and it's been interesting to see how people have responded to it. And we've sadly seen some artists not able to sell anything. We've seen some galleries go away, and that stuff's all terrible. And then on the other hand, I've heard people telling me things like, I've never sold so much art in my life. This has been the best year of sales I've ever had. I've heard that from some galleries. I've heard it from some artists. Were there any positive benefits for you that came from this other than the silence and the ability to concentrate on your work?
Well, I'm no exception. I must say I sold pretty well. I sold pretty well online. I can't say it was the best year ever. Probably not, but I think it was better than last year anyway.
Oh, that's a good thing. And do you
surreal.
sell through galleries, or do you sell exclusively online?
No, I sold online. I sold to my client that live here. They asked me a couple of commissions, like a big portrait, family portrait, stuff like that, in watercolor, because, I'm focusing on figures recently, in addition to plein air, of course. And in some American collectors, I'm lucky enough to have, followers, friends in the States. So that were the two things. And then, I got some gallery now after the lockdown. So, but, it's still too early to say.
Right.
But so far, so good. That point of view, I don't complain.
So in normal times, when you're not in lockdown and you're not having to be worrying about going back into it, how much plein air painting do you do, and how often do you go out?
Well, I'm gonna say a couple times a week, maybe. Yeah. It's I don't wait for events to happen. Just grab my stuff and just go at the park or some suburbs of Milan. I like the suburbs. I like the corners, the areas of the city are pretty neglected in a way. I don't go downtown to paint the Duomo like the cathedral. Well, I did that for a while, for a little while, just to give it a try, to experience that. But I'm not kind of painting monumentals, architecture, iconic architecture. I like the architecture more sort of, the ordinary one,
right?
Like bridges or I don't know what. Work in progress.
More urban scenes, funky old buildings, brick buildings falling down, that kind of a thing, or?
Yeah, I'm a fetishist of the decaying buildings rather than monument.
Watercolor is a unique animal, and it's not something that I I have mastered yet. I tinker with it. I'm using it more and more as I travel because it's just so much easier to travel with. I always have watercolor in my bag when I'm on business trips. Of course, this year I haven't been on any business trips since March. But what is the key when you're painting something like urban scenes or buildings and things like that? How do you make it read right? How do you make it feel, dare I say, realistic? Are you trying to do more impressionistic views? Tell us a little bit about what you do in a case like that.
Well, yeah, the fight between realism and impressionism or even abstraction is always there. It's always a kind of a conflict, a mixed feeling. But basically, I start drawing. I do my sketches. It's something I can do without. So just sometimes I go out just with a sketchbook and draw stuff around, as I said, in the city. And so it all starts from drawing, sketching. The first challenge is just to simplify and to reduce the amount of information that you have in a city or even in a landscape. It's too much information. So, simplify the scene, try to find a focus, try to find an element. Could be a sign or could be anything, a trash can or whatever, to start from and to focus on and start the journey into the scene, to the kind of, the picture. And then I do two or three layers of watercolor with a limited palette. I don't use many colors at any given painting, and that's it. I try to stick to. I have my little scheme in a way, like try to stick with 5 values, with 3 colors, with 7 main shapes. I do try to sort of to find a formula, which is of course not a magic formula. It's kind of trying to find how do you say, the stone, the key to a process, because process is what makes your style in a way. the choices that you do, the material you use, the steps you do in the process. It's they are what at the end of the day, give show your style. It's not even.
Well, let's talk about that, because I find it fascinating. You said 7 shapes. What was it? 5 colors?
5 values.
5 values, 7 shapes.
3 colors.
3 colors. So you're using you're using the 3 primary colors, red, blue, and yellow?
No, necessary. No, not at all. Actually, I do a little. What I teach to my students, especially beginners, of course, is just to focus on one color, the one you can do without. You say, okay, in this scene, this picture, I can do without that orange because I don't, there's a lot of orange in the building, whatever. And then I say, okay, then find the complementary color. So that will be blue. And so then you have 2 colors that are very useful to modify each other, to get darks, to get neutral shades, etc. And then you decide the 3rd color that would just make the increase the temperature, like a warmer or cooler. So in this case, for instance, if you choose to add red to your couple of complementary orange and blue, that would mean you're going to have also purple, and you're going to have a warmer composition, warmer temperature in the composition. If you decide to use green, just saying, it's going to stick a little bit to cooler, So that's the way. That's, of course, they're not strict. It's strict when you do an exercise, but they're good guidelines, especially for not only beginners, I would say, even some intermediate student, would just have some indications to follow, a roadmap. That helps.
Now, talk to me about the 7 shapes.
Well,
how did you arrive at that number? I mean,
oh yeah, okay. Well, of course, it's a convention. It's kind of it's a concept like in the first place, I like to do odd numbers. If you notice, it's just 3, 5, 7, and I found that it's pretty readable. You know what I mean? It's not too much, not too many shapes. Of course, I'm talking main shapes. And it's not too little. It's not too simplistic. If you try, you may find that, you reach 7 shapes in a second. But if you try to stick to that, to give yourself a limit, you may find that you benefit from that, especially in landscapes. Of course, portrait or floral or architecture. Well, architecture could apply, but sometimes you have a lot of details. Because in any case, my theory is you can then split each of these main shapes in, say, sort of 2, 3, 4, 5 fractions, ideally. And so get details that way. I don't know if I make myself understood.
Well, okay, I get the big shapes, and then you're saying you can take each of the big shapes and kind of do sub shapes within.
That's it. Yeah, you got it. Sure. Yeah. Okay. But it's a method. I like to invent little methods for myself and my students. There are many others, but it's fun also to you kind of invent your own. Give yourself rules that you follow for a while and just see if they work, and then in another while you may change them and decide that you need to have, I don't know, 9 shapes, or of course you can increase that the the more skilled you get, that's for sure. But not necessarily, because simplicity is really, really, really hard to achieve, actually.
Yeah, I think it is too. I think it's one of the hardest things that I've had to learn, because you get seduced by detail. And I was coaching. There was a lady at Full Color Week who painted beside me, and she was putting in all the detail before she was putting in any shapes. And I had to try and help her through that, with her permission, to try to break her of that habit. But I used to do the same thing too, and it really, even though I heard it over and over and over again, I didn't do it. And then it was finally somebody kind of beat me over the head and said, "Look, this isn't going to read well unless you've got big shapes," and that just totally changed everything.
Yeah. It's I think it's the toughest challenge for a painter was trying to do a little more than just, if you just grow up as a painter, as an artist, is to make things look simple, look easy, look, readable at a glance, but actually there's a lot of work, like a lot of planning, a lot of awareness. I would say most of all, awareness of what you're doing. Then, of course, beside that, you can have an open mode. You can have a creative mode, in the sense that you experiment, you play, you go by instinct, and do whatever happens, and learn from that, and then apply that to your more structured work. But
I think that's also a very important point, Francesco, because it's the play. Well, there's two things that create growth: play and struggle.
Yeah. But the play is like the problem is when you play and you just just go free, completely free. At the end of the day, after a while, you get tired of this, because you get kind of tired of this because you don't know, you're not sure where you're going to. So I think that's good as a learning process, where you find some new way to do things. Like for instance, a few days. Oh, maybe that was yesterday. I tried to simulate the rain in watercolor, and but I was experimenting just how to render the rain. I wasn't working on my piece. That was kind of the fifth or sixth study that I was doing, that I'm still doing for a project that I have, a painting that I'm just working on. And so I tried to find the way to render the rain, which is not granted. It's not granted. And I found a brush that wasn't supposed to be for that purpose. Just it was there, neglected in the studio. And maybe I'm close to that. So once I get that, if that works, I may apply to my structured painting, where I want something to happen and I have a plan and I want to convey a certain sort of, say, message or communication anyway. So I have to make a little plan, but using what I've found, what I've discovered just by playing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. How much storytelling do you try to put into your artwork?
Well, more and more. Recently, in the past year, as I said, I've worked on figures, and the figures are most of the times at least two in each painting, and then I try to tell the story between these two figures. That may be mother and the daughter, or the teacher and the pupil. It's kind of reading in their eyes their relationship. So if you can call that storytelling, I think we can call it storytelling. So I'm developing that concept, and I'm reflecting on how to put more storytelling and more narrative to my painting,
Right.
especially, of course, studio paintings. And I'm also reflecting back to the experience that we had this year with the pandemic and the quarantine and so on. That I think I feel the need to say something about, say something about what's going on in the world. Of course, in the artistic way, from an angle, an artist angle. I feel like I have to sort of offer something that may be thoughtful, or something a little more, a little deeper than just first impression, the simple beauty,
More meaning.
which is great, of painting just for entertain myself, or just you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm.
I try to I think you got what I mean. So I'm reflecting on how to tell more stories related to the times we're living. Let's put it this way.
Yeah, I like that. Makes a lot of sense. So,
Well, after many years, you need to. It's kind of getting older. You know what I mean? When you get older, you think I don't know. Oh, me. But that's me, probably.
Well, I think it's each has their own individual purpose and meaning. So, why do you paint?
Big question. Why do I paint? Oh, well, I guess there's something wrong with me.
Well, there's something wrong with all of us.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I think it's pretty simple and complex in the sense. I mean, it's because we sense. I think sensitive people need to put that sensitivity into something, just to express that, resolve that sensitivity, and to in convey to something. So I wouldn't say it's a kind of a therapy, but I say that it's a need that I have anyway, to be creative, to make my own world in a way, although everything seems to be inspired by the surroundings, and of course it is, but it's kind of it's something I need to do. I need to do to relate to the world, I think, to myself, ultimately, I think. So I don't know if that's too
There's
weird.
there's not a right or wrong answer. I just was kind of curious about that, because I think you seem to be a pretty deep thinker when it comes down to that kind of thing.
Yeah, well, yeah. Of course I can. Of course I have fun. I do it because I enjoy doing it, because I love colors. I love drawing. I love using this media. But I used to be a musician when I was younger, also, and to write songs and to write quite a lot. So I always had the need to express myself, to say, to write, to make music, to paint, and I don't know what else. So in my case, it must be something. And for the past 30 years, it's been painting. Yeah.
So what is your, if somebody walks up to you and you're outdoors painting, this happens to me all the time, and they say, oh, I wish I could do that. I don't have any talent. I can't draw a stick figure. My aunt did this. what do you do? How do you help encourage people to understand that maybe they can do it? You've dealt with a lot of students. You've taught lots of people.
Yeah. It's an issue because a lot of people have, way too many people have so little self-confidence, So I just say, if you love to do it, you do it. Talent is not our problem. So that happened just sort of last week. A lady brought his son, his 16 years old son that loves to draw, of course. And at the end of the class, that's in an individual class, and I'm giving more single one-on-one classes. She said, "Okay, I asked the boy, do you enjoy it? That was fun. That was interesting. That was inspiring you." And he said, "Yes, it was so happy." And she said, "If you say he can paint, I'll bring him back. If you say he's got a gift for that, or otherwise we won't show up again." I said, no, don't tell me that. Don't ask me that. He must be happy. If he's happy, everything's going to be easier for him to learn. He's got good eye, good hand. He's got I can feel is driven to that. But in any case, is his own desire. So as soon as you decide that, you really deeply desire to do it, that's it. You don't need any other thing.
I think that's a great observation because you always run into these people and you think they had natural talent. And I think what they had is, even as kids, they had this desire to just be drawing all the time. When I was a kid, I was drawing portraits all the time. When I was a little bitty kid, I was always drawing faces. In high school, I was drawing faces. And even though I never had any training and that my drawings were terrible, it was something I enjoyed doing and I loved doing. And so I think your talent, passion overcomes talent.
Absolutely.
There are definitely people who have natural talent, but not very many of them, really, I think. But it's people who have this passion. They love doing it. I think you've really identified it.
Yeah, that's for sure. That's for sure. Because learning is you can tell, because when learning is easy, that means not necessarily that you're talented, but that you have passion, that you like it. Because when you do something you like, you overcome any difficulties. So So that's the answer.
What is that fine line, though, between being a tough teacher, keeping them interested and engaged, but also helping them get beyond their problems and get into growth? I studied with a guy, and he would say, he was very encouraging, but he would say, look, in this particular class, this is what we're doing, and if you don't do it, I'm going to come over and I'm going to scrape your painting down and make you redo it. And I was fine with it because it was tough, but I was fine with it. But I watched other people react very badly to it. What's the right balance on that?
Well, I was taught that way too, in a way. One of my teachers was pretty tough that way. So I didn't mind if they touch on my scrape by painting, no problem. But I don't do that to my students. I try to establish a trusting relationship where I do try to drive the energy, the passion, if they have it. If they don't have it, that's a problem. If they don't really have it, to embrace the difficulties, the obstacles, with a positive attitude. You know what I mean? Like a game,
There goes that ambulance.
Oh yeah. Sorry. And what was I saying? Just to drive the energy and ask questions. I ask a lot of questions. Ask them a lot of questions. Like, do you find this is imbalance? Do you find this is resolved? This painting? Do you find that's the most efficient way to hold the brush? In most times they find the answer themselves.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I don't need to be tough. I never needed to.
Well, it's
to
like
be
our kids.
tough.
Our kids are they're gonna develop much better if we ask them questions rather than tell them everything.
Yeah,
They'll be
yeah.
resistant.
But
Well,
also I give them give them tasks. So even if it's just okay, this week, just do this exercise. Try to do sketches like in 3 values. Just saying, right? So the question is, do you think these are 3 values? And they sort of think, they put in motion their the brain, the mind, and then they find the answer themselves. I don't need to say, yeah, what you did 4 or 5. You know what I mean? I don't
yeah,
need to scream like that.
yeah.
That's
So,
it.
so Francesco, what is your best pitch to get people to try watercolor?
My best.
Because there's a lot of us out there who are using other mediums.
Yeah.
And of course, everybody's got to do what they love. I don't want to change anybody's mind necessarily, but do you have a particular reason that you particularly favor watercolor that maybe would open eyes to that idea?
Well, it's a light medium. It's different. As you know, I paint and all as well, and I love both. But it's like kids. I love them for different reasons. And watercolor is just the light side of it, the watery side of of the painting, and that makes transparency. That makes more something very natural, something very although it's much harder to control, it's a challenge. That's excitement as well. Then it's a little more practical. On the practical side, it's easy to travel with. You use water as a solvent, say,
Right.
not really, but anyway, So it's. It dries fast, so it's more practical. Although material I suggest of good material, not too much, not to spend a fortune, but just a good paper, a couple of nice brushes, and then you start and you try. Well, watercolor is something you can try by yourself, and just get the feeling of it and see if you like it, if you resonate with you. Other medium, maybe you might need a teacher a little earlier than that. But watercolor, you can start tomorrow.
I think like anything, if you're using student grade paints, you're going to have a tougher experience, and if you just step up and get a little better paint, you're gonna find it's a better experience. I'm sure the same is probably true for watercolor. I know I've had my frustrating moments, and then I thought, I'm just using some cheap paint. Maybe I need to get some good paint. So what do you use? What kind of paper do you use? What kind of brushes do you use?
Well, I use paper now. I think I'm turning to Canson Heritage. Canson Heritage is very nice. It's a great standard. Been trying several through the years. Now, I think I will stick for a while. I will stick with this. Then paints are the American brand, most famous that you have nowadays is Daniel Smith, watercolor, fine paint, and brushes. I have a mix, but most of them are Princeton, Princeton, Sable, and Squirrel. Hair. So I suggest beginners to have just a couple of them, just not too many. I mean, 5 or 6 color of good quality are much better than just the whole case, the whole box of like 24 tubes. Better have 4, 5, 6 good grade Daniel Smith pure watercolor.
And do you use watercolor that's out of the tube, or do you use the ones that are in the cakes, or does it matter?
No, I use the tubes. They way more convenient to me because pens, so you have to warm inside the brush, and I don't like that, to just dig into it and just warm the tip of the brushes, which are pretty delicate, and so no, I use tubes. I use tubes.
All right, cool. Well, Francesco, this has been fun having a chat and getting to know you a little bit better, and I really appreciate you being on the PleinAir Podcast.
Oh, thank you, Eric. Thank you. It's always a pleasure talking to you and talking to to the audience. I imagine there's so many people listen to what you do. You do so many events and initiatives that we artists all have to thank you for sure.
Oh, you're very welcome. How can people find out more about you? Do you have a website or something you want to tell them about?
Sure. Yeah. FrancescoFontana.com.
Okay.
FrancescoFontana.com. And you find everything. You find the classes. I do a lot of Zoom classes now. So for people overseas, that's great. We can connect and
absolutely.
I can offer just a chat. We can chat for sort of 15 minutes. Just people can submit, just show me the efforts. So we'll just talk about what they may need to focus on, and then we can start classes if they wish, or they're free to do what they want. But we don't need to be. We can do it online anyway.
Right.
So that's one of the options.
Excellent.
Go to the website. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Francesco, and thanks again for being on the podcast.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you.
Well, thanks again to Francesco Fontana. He's a good friend, a great guy, a wonderful painter. Love this guy. Thank you, Francesco. Are you guys ready for some art marketing ideas?
This is the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads, author of the #1 Amazon bestseller, Make More Money Selling Your Art. Proven techniques to turn your passion into profit.
In the Marketing Minute, I answer your art marketing questions, or at least I try. And sometimes I never see them before I answer them. I don't script them. So here we go. Email your questions to me, eric@artmarketing.com. Here's a question from Kate Emery in Farmington, Connecticut. My wife, her grandmother grew up in Farmington, Connecticut. Historical Society there has an old building, and as a matter of fact, that's a family farm. Anyway, Kate says, Eric, my question is in regards to art shows. I paint in a few different styles and different subjects, landscape, portrait, abstract. Do you think it makes more sense to stick to one style and subject, or to mix it up? On the one hand, it feels like variety will give me more chances to win, but I do think when it comes across as less professional somehow. Well, I'll tell you a story, Kate. I had an artist who did some advertising with me, and she called and she said, my ads didn't work. I said, well, they're working for some people, because I'm hearing from them too. Let's find out why. So I said, let's look at your ad. And we looked at her ad, and she was advertising portraiture. And so I went to her website with her on the phone, and I said, okay, let's look at your website. And on the front of the website was a landscape painting. And I said, well, if you're advertising portraiture, they ought to find portraiture there. She said, well, I do lots of different kinds of painting. I said, yes, but you're advertising, you want to capture what you're advertising for, because you're going to drive more people from that than anything else. So I went and I said, okay, let's find the portraiture. And so I just kind of did what anybody else would do, and I kind of poked around. I couldn't find it. Couldn't find it anywhere. Finally, after 10 steps, I found it. And I said, look, you got to bring it to light. I have had this conversation with many artists over many, many, many years. You want to get branded as something, because if you get branded as all things, you become branded as nothing. And, I know a lot of artists who do a lot of styles, and they might use a synonym, they might use another name. And, let's say they do abstract, they invent a name for their abstract, and they have a separate website for their abstract. There's nothing wrong with lots of subject matter, but you want to kind of get known for something. And you want to kind of push something. I think that's the answer. In terms of art shows, I don't know if you're talking about competitions because you said chances to win. I suppose it gives you more chances to win. The reality is in art competitions like PleinAir Salon, the more things you enter, the more chances to win. Gallery owners who are art judges might see one thing they like and another thing they don't like. So if you enter 2 things, you might have a chance. 3 things, you might have a better chance. 4 things, you might have a different chance. But, it boils down to quality, and people are going to pick the best quality. I have found that most artists are not really good at all things. What are you best at? Put your best foot forward and think about that. And it's not less professional somehow, but it will confuse the marketplace if, let's say you won in 2 categories and one was an abstract and one was a landscape, and your name came up in both of them, you're going to confuse the marketplace when they see that. So just keep that in mind. Branding is something that we all need to learn and understand. I talk a lot about it in my book, and it is something that is really worth understanding because if you get branded incorrectly, it's really hard to overcome. Here's a question from Thomas in Dallas. Again, I've not read this one. It says, I have a card line for my art, and the gift store market seems to have fallen through. The numbers say I shouldn't make any new cards at this time, and that means I don't have a catalog to use for marketing. I have some loyal customers who are still buying my designs, but many of the stores I sell to still have product from earlier in the year. My question then is about supply and demand for artists. Well, I'm not sure what the question is exactly, Thomas, but I think let me see if I can figure this out. What I think you're saying is, they have inventory. They're not going to buy new cards because they have inventory. Well, that may or may not be true. First off, a lot of people have inventory because they had their stores closed during COVID, right? And so, our assumption is that they're going to have a lot left over. But, now that people are getting out, they're spending a lot of money, they're buying a lot of things, holidays are coming up. I think, if they're used to seeing you coming out with a new catalog every year and new stuff every year, I think you need to do it. And you want to put your new work out there, and their chances are they're going to order some new work. You just never know what they're facing. And you said you need a catalog to use for marketing. Well, use it for marketing. It may or may not be the best year. You may not want to print as many, or you might want to take a shot. You're going to eventually sell them. And you said you have some loyal customers buying your designs, so those people will probably buy them. I think I'd go for it, and also ask yourself this: is there a specialty product that I could put in there that might sell especially well right now? For instance, could you do something that is very related to COVID times, that people might find fun, it's for a gift card, like pictures of people in masks or whatever. You never know. I mean, look for something that will be relevant. Relevance tends to sell better than non-relevance. Well, anyway, I hope that helps you and gives you some direction on some art marketing. All right.
This has been the Marketing Minute with Eric Rhoads. You can learn more at artmarketing.com.
A reminder to sign up for Watercolor Live at watercolorlive.com and to book your seat for the PleinAir Convention at PleinAirConvention.com. Also, get out there and vote. If you've not seen my blog where I talk about life and art and other things, check it out. It's called Sunday Coffee. You can find it at coffeewitheric.com. It's especially relevant right now, coffeewitheric.com. And last, I'm on Facebook and YouTube every weekday at 12 noon. I've done it now for, 220 days in a row. And check it out. Just go to Facebook or YouTube and search Streamline Art Video. You'll find it there. It's also on my personal page. You can go there and you can follow me there, but unfortunately I can't follow you back because they only give me 5,000. So anyway, but I'd love to have you. And I'm putting artists on every day, and we're doing demos. And then every day at 3 o'clock, I'm doing samples of art instruction videos. We're meeting a lot of new people. And so if you're somewhere from anywhere in the world, check it out. Come and join us. It's a lot of fun. Well, this is always fun. Let's do it again sometime, like next week. I will see you then. My name is Eric Rhoads, publisher and founder of PleinAir Magazine. You can find us online at outdoorpainter.com, or you can get a subscription at pleinairmagazine.com. Remember, it's a big world out there, and you need to go paint it, especially if your weather's holding up. But I painted in the snow during Fall Color Week recently, and I've had a lot of fun. I had to paint faster because I got a little cold. But anyway, big world, go paint it. We'll see you. Bye-bye.
This has been the PleinAir Podcast with PleinAir Magazine's Eric Rhoads. You can help spread the word about PleinAir painting by sharing this podcast with your friends. And you can leave a review or subscribe on iTunes so it comes to you every week. And you can even reach Eric by email, eric@pleinairmagazine.com. Be sure to pick up our free ebook, 240 PleinAir Painting Tips by some of America's top painters. It's free at pleinairtips.com. Tune in next week for more great interviews. Thanks for listening.